We're always setting goals to improve our health and get in the best shape we can. Each year we spend billions of pounds on the latest sporting equipment, but the newest trend may stop you from burning a hole in your pocket: barefoot running. Of course, this style of running has been around long before anyone even thought of designing a shoe, but it seems it's having a comeback. But why all of a sudden are we returning to the most basic form of running?
We was born barefoot, we never used to have shoes. It's only over the years people like, shoe manufacturers have come along and put more shoes out there.
Help no end, I don't get as much pain from my knees as I used to.
I'm Evie Dryden and I'll be taking off my trainers to test the hype around barefoot running and see if the injury rate truly is lower than running with shoes.
Obviously when you change it to barefoot running, you tend to land on your forefoot. Obviously you're not going to get strike injuries to your heel, but you might get metatarsal injuries.
By looking at the effects trainers have on our running styles, we can determine the impact this has on our joints and ultimately our health.
I do believe that they do change how you feel the ground.
To begin this investigation, I've come to meet up with some barefoot runners. The group was started by Ricardo, who's been running barefoot for nearly 7 years. He's a firm believer in the practice after getting regular injuries in his knees when he ran with shoes. He now even runs races barefoot. But an injury in 2015 proved to him that he was actually onto something. Ricardo had tripped on some stairs at a railway platform, leaving him with several injuries to his foot and leg. After confirmation from the physio, he began to walk barefoot for 3 miles every morning. His recovery time was 4 months faster than expected and shocked many of his doctors.
The ligaments got damaged, the tendons got torn, I tore my muscle here, I'd cracked a cuboid bone. Loads of things going wrong in that time, so I proved them wrong.
He's agreed to teach me how to run barefoot so I can see the results for myself. At first, I have to keep my shoes on as my foot pads are a lot softer and weaker than the barefoot runners. They've been able to build up a tough cushioning in their feet, but they still have to be careful for sharp objects on the ground.
So you need to make sure imagine you're riding a bike, so you're lifting the knees up,
Okay.
holding their hand, just keep nice and light.
Okay.
Nice circular motion, so
Yep.
you're not heel striking. Just that bounce and it'll be absolutely fine.
Okay. There's little stones, it's quite painful. Ricardo tells me when we land on our forefoot, the harsh forces going up the leg are reduced. This is because our leg acts like a spring compared to hitting the floor with our heel. So I've asked Ricardo what he thinks about people who don't believe it's a better way of running.
So what do you have to say to people who criticise barefoot runners? Obviously a lot of people who are against it and say it's bad for your feet. What do you have to say to them?
I think what I'd say first of all is that everybody's individual. It's not for everybody. Running in trainers isn't for everybody. It's the same sort of thing. We was born barefoot. We never used to have shoes. It's only over the years people like, shoe manufacturers have come along and put more shoes out there. I just think, try it. Give it a try. And if you don't like it, fine. At least you've tried. But how can you comment if you haven't tried? I do get a little bit wound up sometimes when you get these, I call them foolish people, who straight away poo it and they've never tried it. They've never tried it at all. How can you make a judgment on that?
After a good morning workout, a bacon sandwich at the local cafe is definitely in order. Here I was able to catch up with Andrew, who met Ricardo at a park run event. He also experienced reoccurring pain when he ran with trainers, which is a common ailment for most runners. But since ditching the shoes, he was surprised to see that the pain disappeared.
Do you feel that when you used to run with shoes, did you have more injuries running with shoes than you do now without shoes?
Yeah, I do run with shoes still, but I think that barefoot running has probably strengthened my feet and my calf muscles and so on to take some of the stress off my knees. But help no end, I don't get as much pain from my knees as I used to.
Andrew also tells me it's not unusual to be stopped by people mid-run to ask why they have no shoes on.
And some people completely ignore you, Some people do react, either surprise, shock, possibly disgust, I don't know.
Until your feet fall off.
Yeah. Well, I've been doing this 6 years, I still have foots now.
Really?
So, yeah.
I think the reactions encourage me, to be quite honest. the more outlandish the reaction, the more I like it. But, I can see that that's not everybody's cup of tea.
Running barefoot is definitely a different experience. I've had to concentrate more on where I place my feet, but at the same time, running without shoes reminded me of being a child again. Sometimes you'd forget how long you've been running for. Running when the ground is wet also makes our feet super sensitive, just like when our hands and feet soften when we're in the bath. The result? Feeling everything that's under our feet, every tiny stone, every dent in the ground.
It's quite sensitive on the feet where the ground is cold, although Ricardo is saying how your feet will eventually just like turn on and they'll be warm. So I'm waiting for that moment to happen.
I've had no injuries when running barefoot, but I haven't tested it long enough to see the effects properly. So far, Ricardo and Andrew have said the lightness of their running form reduces any harsh impacts travelling up their legs. But is there a downside to barefoot running? I want to get the opinion of a podiatrist, a person who deals with feet, to find out if it's all it's cracked up to be. I've come to see David Smith, who can tell me about the impact running has on our feet and joints. David is a registered podiatrist and has completed an MSc in applied biomechanics. He feels barefoot runners are putting themselves at risk of other injuries rather than ridding them of the aches and pains they had before.
Okay, but then if you land on your forefoot, obviously when you change it to go barefoot running, you tend to land on your forefoot. Obviously you're not going to get strike injuries to your heel, but you might get metatarsal injuries, especially if you tend to land on the outside edge of your foot. If you've got a supinated foot posture and you land on the outside and you land on these small bones, they're not big like this bone here, so these ones can tend to fracture and get stress fractures or damages to the metatarsal heads which are here.
He explains when people run in trainers they usually get strike injuries to their heel. This is because the cushioned sole of a trainer means runners feel comfortable landing on that part of the foot, but the protection trainers provide is limited. Running in trainers can also cause injuries to the tibialis anterior muscle, which is the muscle that controls the rest of the foot as it lands. So although barefoot running would stop these injuries, David believes it would just lead to a problem elsewhere in the foot or leg. He's also not convinced that Ricardo's recovery time after his injury was down to walking barefoot.
Can't imagine why it would be, but one case, it's got no power in it to say anything about anything really. I got better 4 months quicker than I would have compared to what, or he didn't injure himself 5 or 6 times and see which one got better quicker with a different treatment regime. He just made the assumption because in his mind he had this idea that walking in barefoot was better, so he got better quicker.
So David believes that running barefoot doesn't actually reduce injuries. It's more likely that the bottom of the foot would be prone to puncture wounds because it's exposed and unprotected. And although the muscles in the foot may strengthen over time, some are worried that transitioning from trainers to barefoot could damage the bones in our feet. But to better understand how these injuries happen, I've come to see Courtney and Andrea at the Sports Ready Clinic run by the University of Kent to learn about the different strains we put through our feet. This device measures the gait pattern of their foot. Gait is the way a person walks, jogs or runs. In other words, how they place their foot on the ground and where the pressures on the foot are.
You want to get the whole of the foot involved, so planting the heel of your foot and then curling round and using all of your toes if possible to maximise the weight distributed along the whole of the foot.
But when Courtney took off her shoes, the results were very surprising. She used her whole foot when running rather than landing on her forefoot.
As you can see, the darker colours mean that there's a lot more pressure. So there's a lot more pressure in the front of my foot, also on the left side as well. But without shoes, you can see that the picture is more full. So I use the whole of my foot more so when I'm not wearing trainers. So as you can see, all of the toes are in use.
Despite using her whole foot, there was more pressure at the front, suggesting that less impact will be going up the heel. Andrea, on the other hand, showed me there are different ways of running barefoot.
So these are quite different to Courtney's because you're using mostly the front of your foot.
Yep.
Is that better or worse?
I mean, it's not terrible because there is a curvature of the foot. I'm not just walking flat-footed or running flat-footed. And in the right, I do use the whole of my foot. But it suggests that I may not put as much pressure through my left side, and that might increase the risk of injury on the right side of my leg.
So the equal distribution of pressure on the foot reduces the chance of injury. This is because any forces going up the leg are absorbed by the whole foot. In Andrea's case, putting most of her weight on her right side could damage muscles or joints. This could be a problem for some barefoot runners if they don't keep the weight even between their feet. So are shoes better at reducing the impact between the foot and the ground?
I do believe that they do change how you feel the ground and what pressure you try to put through your shoe. So I think running barefooted allows you to use what you have.
It depends on people's running styles as well. So, for example, what may suit me might not suit Andrea.
From what I've learnt from David and the Sports Ready Clinic, it seems that barefoot running can have its risks too. But despite the possibility of injury, Ricardo continues to teach others about barefoot running and has now started a barefoot walking group to encourage people to embrace their natural strengths. As everyone gets on their way, I'm able to reflect on how the running has gone.
My calves feel quite tight, they're quite sore at the moment, and I think that's just because I'm using the calf muscles differently from how I would normally run. It's like a completely different running style, and I think that's supposedly why this is meant to be so good for runners who have a lot of injuries in their knees and ankles.
Runners are always searching for ways to avoid injury. As humans, it's in our nature to improve and develop, and we're not afraid to try some crazy ideas. But the debate over whether we're better the way we are, or if we need external aid to improve, continues. Barefoot running gets a mixed response from runners and experts alike. For some, it's reasonable to think that because we weren't born with shoes, why should we need them? The human body has developed over millions of years, so arguably it is equipped to survive a run without shoes. But since the development of the running shoe, world records show that athletes are running faster and further. Are shoes part of that reason, or are we just training better? Ultimately, there isn't one answer to the question, is barefoot running better? Because we're all different. For Ricardo and Andrew and all the barefoot runners, it's clear this style of running works. But as David points out, it's not foolproof. After our feet have been protected by shoes for so many years, the most common mistake many first-time barefoot runners make is going too hard too fast. So if you want to give barefoot running a go and see if it works for you, remember to take your time and listen to your body.